talking with God about kings and kingdoms. This week, impotence, vitality, and succession. Good story coming up. Come on in, let's check it out. 1 Kings chapter 1 and 2.
All the bubbas of the world, we got one mission in mind.
Welcome to the Biblical Channel. Always glad somebody is showing up. And we here at the Biblical Channel just want to get the word out. We want people to pray that God is their Father. To pray to God as their Father and be excited about the stories that he tells us. He tells us these stories because it's a great story. I can't imagine why anybody wouldn't think these are great stories, but I get the fact that sometimes these stories have been somewhat muffled and I don't know. They haven't been handled very well. And all I'm saying is I'm just a bubba, and I find my father's story to be funny. So we are into 1st and 2nd Kings now, and let us also remind ourselves that the 4 books of 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, and 2 Kings are really just part of one big volume that needed 4 different scrolls to contain them, and the titles of these things came in time. The title of the whole series was called Kings and Kingdoms. So we're talking with God. We're talking with our Father about a story that he put together with real life people and real life events so that we might draw in and understand that he is absolutely spot on in his assessment of humanity, and he's absolutely spot on in the storyline that he creates that will eventually land in the person of the Lord Jesus Christ. It's brilliant stuff, ladies and gentlemen. We just want to be excited about it. We just want to wring the chamois of life out to the best of our ability, and having having our Father's words of his stories in our mind is exactly where we should be. And that's what we're doing right here. We're having fun talking about God. We're getting away from the bullshit to the holy shit so that we, can shoot the shit and sound like we know our shit. Rejoice always, pray continually. That's the will of God. Anywho, moving on. 1 Kings and 2 Kings is where we are. And so we really haven't heard the last of David yet. 2 Kings closes with the last words of David, true, and kind of the last real heavy look at David and his life, the big picture of David. But David's still alive, and so we need to still say something about David. This will be the last of David. He will die in chapter 2. So, and then we're on to something different. So the opening chapter of 1 Kings starts off with a very, very sad look at David. He is cold, he is old, he is advanced in years, and he's impotent. The text says that he just couldn't get warm, and his servants thought to themselves, well, let's get a beautiful young lady. And so they searched the whole land, and they got the most beautiful lady in the whole land. Her name is Abishag, the Shunammite, and they bring her in to wait on him. Remember, David has a lot of wives, and he has 19 sons at least. This has been David's story, is the accumulation of these wives, and the story of Absalom and his kids going wild has been really an easy crime drama to figure out, and that is because you really can't effectually father, like this. You can't bed women and have sons, and you can just tell that he's out of control. Now, don't give me the exceptions. I understand there are exceptions, and there are men that have bed women and they've somehow done so successfully in having children and raised successful children. Donald Trump is one of them, man. I wasn't a big fan of Donald Trump in 2015, and I heard a black guy tell me one time that he said, you got to give Donald Trump a lot of credit. All of his children love him, and they're pretty, none of them are off the rails and crazy. I thought, man, that is a perspective that we ought to take notice of and give him credit for to some degree. But David's life is the typical life of what will happen when your sex life is just out of control. Everything is out of control. So David is now advanced in his years. He's about almost dead. They bring in the hottest chick of the land, and she actually sleeps with them at night. And the text says, "But the king knew her not," meaning nothing happened. Now, a lot of people like to church up that story and say, "Well, it was just a plutonic thing. They were just trying to get him warm." Come on, man. The when you read Genesis chapter 2, the man shall leave the father and mother, and they were naked and unashamed, and the two became one. If you don't read sex into that, then you're daft. You're a simpleton. You just, I don't know. You don't pick up on hints very well. And here, that little line that says, "But the king knew her not," it's like, okay, well, David's in a strange place. We'll come back to that in a minute. But I want to just, so that's how the opening of the story of First Kings starts out. It's not a good look at with David. Not a big surprise for us readers, that this just seems like, the way that David's life would end. He's started out so cool as that young man with all that faith and vitality, now he's impotent, and he becomes more and more impotent as time goes on, and that's the problems in his life. So it's not a huge surprise for us, but here we go again, as the old saying goes, deja vu all over again. And this time, another son has decided, "Oh, I'm going to be king." Adonijah raises up his chalice and says to his mates, I suppose, "I will be king." And then everybody's like, "Oh, that's so cool, buddy." I've been watching that movie the series Succession on HBO. A little bit sad and dark, but a dark comedy, I guess, and a picture of reality. I do like that. I'm a huge Dostoevsky fan, because of the dark reality or dark comedy of human error that people are able to pick up on and present. Anywho, Adonijah is going to follow in his brother's footsteps. He's going to assemble chariots and horsemen and 50 men to run before him, and he's going to run all around and he say, "I want to be king." And a lot of people are like, cool, dude, just like people are. I mean, there's always people willing to follow an idiot. So, the text tells us that his father had never at any time displeased him by asking, "What have you done? Why have you done thus and so?" Meaning that David has never challenged him. David is not a good dad, Matt, meaning that he just doesn't do anything with his children. He sires them. He's really good at siring them. He's vital, he's virile. And the text is making it very clear that this Adonijah is very handsome. So David does have the skill of making good-looking kids, but he also makes spoiled kids because he never challenges them. He doesn't really have anything to say to them, it seems, especially on any kind of disciplinary role, which is a little bit stunning if you ask me, because you would expect David to know better. However, he is a human being, and how many times have you known? I know plenty of human beings who I'm always just scratching my head saying, "I don't know why you can't get this right," but they don't get it right, and they never do get it right, and that's a part of the human scene, if you know what I mean. So this handsome man is now running around town saying, "I'm going to be king." And he actually gets some key figures to follow in behind him. Zadok the priest and I'm not Zadok the priest. No, not him. Joab, old Joab. He's like, "Yeah, let's do this thing." And then Abiathar, a bit of a surprise because Abiathar is a good guy. He's been with David, but perhaps everybody's a little frustrated with David. We know that Joab always gets frustrated with David because he's, kind of insecure, and I'm sorry, I didn't finish my point. My point is that David might be a messed up, head case. His life, he just might be a mess because it seems like his dad and his brothers did not treat him very well. If you go back and read the 1 Samuel, it seems like David received more of the left hand of fellowship, not the right hand of fellowship from his family. His dad didn't even number him as a son to present to Samuel when he was asking, for all of Jesse's sons. David wasn't even brought out. And then the brothers, when they meet up with David. They're pretty harsh on David. I don't, that's just what the text says. So maybe David just never gets over the strange upbringing that he had. Maybe he was just last on the food chain and never paid attention to, and consequently he doesn't pay attention to his sons because nobody paid attention to him. It's what the text gives us, and I think it's a fair call. I don't know how much we can make out of it, but David is clearly not a good dad. He's disinterested in fathering. He offers up nothing displeasing for his son. So he raises spoiled children and good-looking children. So he finds good-looking wives and has good-looking children, and he does nothing to them, so they become great-looking spoiled children. Well, anyhow, Adonijah, he is full steam in motion. He's slaughtering sheep and doing all kinds of public actions to declare his place. Okay, so there is somebody in the background who says, okay, enough's enough. This is crazy. We ain't going through this again. Meaning that, you can see that this Absalom thing is going to come back and haunt us. It's deja vu all over again. Nathan the prophet, who is a good guy. Remember, Nathan the prophet actually challenged David. He actually risked his own life to tell the king that he was a freaking nincompoop for having sex with Bathsheba, and even more so, having her husband killed in the front lines of battle, Uriah. And so it's Nathan. Nathan's got, what seems to be kingdom mind. Nathan is actually concerned, and not only is he concerned about the kingdom, but he seems to understand what the kingdom needs in a successor. And the last thing, they need is Adonijah, because Adonijah is like Absalom, and Absalom really isn't any different than Amnon. And, so there's this whole host of bad kids that David has. And David is old, and it's about ready for him to die. And so I think everybody's just kind of making moves. And Nathan waits until this moment, to see a bad move happening before he says, okay, I've got to do something here. So there he does. He has a plan. And so he, in chapter 1, verse 11, he puts a plan together. And the plan that he puts together is surrounding Bathsheba and her son Solomon. One of her sons, Solomon. Solomon's not her only son. There's like 3 or 4 other sons that she has. But anyhow, so I get the feeling that, Nathan and Solomon, I'm sure Nathan was well acquainted with all these children and all these wives, so Nathan has been presented to us as a good guy, and therefore I think it's right to give credit where credit is due, and see that he seems to see something in Solomon that he likes and would like to. So anyhow, the plan is he goes to Bathsheba. He says, "Hey man, don't you know what's going on?" She's like, "Yeah." And he's like, okay, I want you to go in and tell David what's going on, and remind him that he promised you that your son would be king on the throne. Now, we don't find in the text anything like this, so we're kind of unsure. It's like, what? We don't remember any line back in 2 Samuel somewhere where, David said, and you know what? I'm going to make Solomon. You get the feeling, and here's what I get the feeling of. I get the feeling that David probably told that to all of his lovers. Like, he probably made a lot of that. We know that he's got a problem with the bedroom. He's got a problem with women. He is an over promiser, and so I think as an over promiser and a charlatan or a philanderer like he is, I think he probably told everybody that their kids were going to be king. That's why everybody keeps making runs for it, because their mothers, all told them, well, you're going to be king, you're going to be king, you're going to be king. So I think that there's truth in it, but sadly, I think that everybody probably heard it. However, it's just that angle that Nathan puts together that he hopes will get David out of the impotence zone and into the vitality zone. So he sends Bathsheba in there. She lays it all out there. She's like, do you know what's going on? Do you know that Adonijah is having like a grand party in the streets? Did you tell him that he would be king? And, and David, of course, is probably feeling like, oh, grumbling a bit. And Nathan had previously told Bathsheba, as you're telling him this, I'll come in and I'll say the same thing. So Nathan comes in. It's a well-rehearsed plan. It's a clever plan. It's just a well-rehearsed plan. I don't know about how clever it is, but it's kind of a last-ditch effort here, because Adonijah is seemingly going to be a train wreck. It's going to be a pattern repeat of Absalom. And anywho, Nathan comes in and he's like, "Hey, dude, do you know what's going on, Mr. King?" And the people are dancing in the streets and they're saying, "Long live Adonijah." Did you, approve of this? Okay. So David takes the hook, line, and sinker, and he calls Bathsheba to him, and he says, "Okay, listen. As long as the Lord lives, who has redeemed my soul out of every adversity," and of course, this is verse 29. "As I swore to you by the Lord, the God of Israel, saying, Solomon, your son, shall reign before me, and he shall sit on my throne in this place. Even so will I do this day." Bathsheba bows down. She's like, "Man, my Lord, the king, long live the king forever." Well, we know he's about ready to die. But, again, probably, this was true, but it's probably true for everybody. It's just the thing, though, that actually allows the plan to move forward. David does, feel to himself like, hey, Adonijah should have come to me. So he's probably, I don't know. He just, it just doesn't seem like David's a huge thinker in this realm. He lets an awful lot go on around him. He never says anything bad to anybody. But when, you do get the sense that maybe he's saying to himself, "Well, you little sucker, you could have come to me at least." And so this is the perfect plan. David says, "Go get Zadok the priest." And all of a sudden, David becomes vital. He gets in touch with his vitality, his virile side again, and he like wakes up, he's like, "Call Zadok the priest," in verse 32. "Get Nathan in here, get Benaiah the son of Jehoiada in here, get everybody together and go up and make Solomon king." And these guys are like, amen. It's like, it's been forever since they've heard the king, actually interested or clear about anything. They yell amen. So this was kind of like David must be preaching this game plan, and they're all probably like, thank God we got a leader on our hands finally, and so then, Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet, they do it all. They have this grand ceremony. They make Solomon the king, and then all of a sudden, people from town are now drawn to this event. And as people from town are all drawn to this event, and all the who's who are going to this event, back at Adonijah's event, it's like party town there. And then all of a sudden it turns into, oh shit. Adonijah and all the guests who were with him in verse 41 heard it as they were finished feasting, meaning they heard this ruckus going on, and they're like, "What is that?" And then somebody tells Joab, "Well, Solomon actually sits on the throne. Moreover, the king's servants have come over to congratulate our Lord the king, and woo, blessed be the Lord God of Israel, who has granted someone to sit on my throne." Okay, bam. And then now, Adonijah is like, oh boy. Okay, so Adonijah seems to be a smart guy. He goes straight to Solomon, and he says, well, he doesn't go straight to Solomon. He has others tell Solomon that he fears for his life. Now, keep in mind, Adonijah had this big party about him becoming king, and he specifically did not invite Nathan or Solomon or Bathsheba and David's mighty men and Benaiah. Okay. So we know that this plot was not baked out of goodness. This thing was baked out of a turd. And so anyhow, he gets word to Solomon that, "Oh, I'm afraid for my life." And Solomon says, "Hey, if he will show himself a worthy man, and not one of his hairs will fall to the earth." Now, he says, "So go to your house. It's cool." Now, Solomon is already doing something that David never did. David is an over promiser, meaning that David gets all emotional and he overpromises, and then that gets him into trouble because then he's got to keep promises, and then then he can't remember all of his promises. So Solomon says, hey, if you're going to be a good guy about all of this, not a hair on your head's going to, be hurt. And so that's a great move, and we see this move again, as Solomon will tell Abiathar, the priest, who's going to need some correction, and so he says to Abiathar, he says, you know what, you did some good things with my dad, and I'll tell you what, you just stick with your house. You're under house arrest, but you are not going to be priest. You stick with your house, just stay to yourself, and everything will be cool. He says, thank you. And then he gives Shimei the same offer, same bargain. He's like, hey, you have deceived my father. You have done bad things in this town. However, if you live your life in Jerusalem, never leave Jerusalem, and go to your house and live under house arrest, then you can live out the days of your life and no problem. And Shimei is like, yeah, okay, that sounds great. Okay, so once again, Solomon is already behaving, kingly, which is a good sign. This is all a very good sign. And so then it comes to the grand moment. David is going to now do something that we've been waiting for since, we just would have assumed that, right after David took on his first wife, Michal. Remember Michal? Mitchell? Remember her? Saul's, he was very excited about her, and she was very excited about him. And we expected what we're going to hear in chapter 2, verse 1. We expected a long time ago. Be strong, and that is David, gets Solomon close to him, and he says, it's a very sweet moment. He says, I'm about to go away, go the way of all of the earth. Be strong, show yourself a man, and keep charge of the Lord your God, walking in his ways and keeping his statutes. Oh my God, David. We have never heard, and very intentionally so. In fact, we've been told just the opposite. David says nothing. He doesn't say anything to challenge his boys. He doesn't say anything to his boys, I don't think. He might have a drink with them and a party with them, but he doesn't do anything with these kids. But now he's doing something that he should have done, and it's not too hard to do. He is commanding them. He is being a good dad at this point. Solomon's he's not a kid. You know what I mean? He's like, okay. But he's doing something that he should have done with all these kids, and that is commanding them to live by the laws of Moses, that they may prosper in what they do, and that the Lord may establish his word that he spoke concerning me, saying, if your sons pay close attention to the way they walk, their walk before me in faithfulness with all of their heart, with all of their soul, they shall not lack, there will always be a man in Israel from your line. So David is well, it's great. He's in this vital mode, and so now he's bringing the son in and he's teaching him, and it's great. I don't want to take away from that, but and listen, if there is a dad out there, then you haven't, it's never too late. I guess that's what I'm saying. It's never too late. If you haven't done what you should do, it's never too late. That's part of the moral of this story. It's never too late. Because, we'll flash forward, already Solomon is behaving in a way that is so much more like a king, than David seemingly ever did. David just simply wasn't good at managing the empire, sustaining it and looking out for it. Well, anyhow, David has other advice for Solomon. He says, hey, concerning Joab, you're going to have to deal with him. He's a nightmare, and you do what you need to do. But I would not let. And David says this. He says, I would not let his gray head go down to Sheol in peace. That's funny. And then he says the same thing of Shimei. He's like, hey, that guy's a bad guy, and I overvowed on him, and I didn't do anything with him. But you do what you want, but you should bring his gray head down to the blood of Sheol. And then he also says, but hey, Barzillai, that guy's choice. He's gold. He's always been good to me. Keep him close. He'll be good for you. He'll do the right thing. So we have this moment where David is saying, do as I say, not as I do. And oh, by the way, you need to do what I should have done, kind of moment. Fair enough. And David died. And it's a pretty short set of verses for David's death. So there's no, mass celebration that we might have expected. David actually had a mass, celebration. It's recorded that David had a mass celebration for Saul. There's no mass celebration really recorded here for David. I suspect the city was in mourning. But perhaps they were just looking past David and thankful to get, a little bit better behavior out of their king in Solomon. So anyhow, the scene in chapter 2 closes with Adonijah. He comes to Bathsheba. It just shows you what a snake in the grass this guy is. He goes to Bathsheba. He says, hey, talk to your son. I would like Abishag, David's, concubine. Now we know that here's the thing. This is an ancient world policy, but it really was a thing. And that is, if you could sleep with one of your father's wives, you were making a statement, a public statement that you were the rightful heir or stuff like it. It was a power move. It's a power move. And so he asks Bathsheba, and Bathsheba's like, well, I'll ask Solomon. And she does. She faithfully asks Solomon to give him Abishag, who is the most beautiful girl in the world, apparently. And she sleeps with David, but he never, knew her. So I don't know if he knows this or if he doesn't know this, but Solomon says, are you kidding me? You might as well just ask for the kingdom. You know what? I gave my warning to old Adonijah. I told him as long as he behaves, he would not be put to the sword. Now it's time to put him to the sword. Adonijah, is then put to the sword. Joab hears of this, and Joab runs to the high place, to the altar, to church. Kind of think of it like this, or it's kind of like a makeshift temple. But Joab runs there because he's like, oh shit, man, it's hitting the fan now. It's really, really, going south in a hurry. Solomon says, go find Joab and put him to death. And he does. And then Shimei, complies with his house arrest order for 3 years, and then he can't take it anymore. And he goes off, to Gath, to the Philistines to get some slaves. And Solomon says, see, I told you that, and you know that, so it's time for you to die. So Solomon is actually acting like a vital man who keeps his word, gives people an honest chance to make amends and do the right thing, and does not overpromise, and that's good. Here's one bad thought. One bad thought is that so far in the text, there's been nothing about what God thinks. So we're not really sure what God thinks. That's for next week. Okay, so we'll hold that thought. So at the end of chapter 2, you're like, the kingdom was established in the hand of Solomon. But what does God have to say? Nobody's asked that question, and God has not been brought into anything. We kind of assume Nathan's on God's side, but that's not it. But let me also tell you that this is the story of David. And the story of David is the story of a bad father. And, it keeps coming up over and over again. It is the defining, it's a very defining thing about David and his fatherhood skills, because fatherhood is so important to God. And God holds David accountable for his bad fatherhood. And I will tell you that I don't mind saying that the world has always been in desperate need of people who really understand what it means to be a father. As David knows and gives his son instruction, and as we are told biblically, a father gives his sons and his daughters instructions. He leads them in this way, that he gives them good instructions, and he points them to God in everything, in all of his commandments, and he keeps, pointing them to God. And when, we find David cold and impotent here, it reminds me of the modern day. I see a lot of men who I think are impotent and they need to take little blue pills because they watch too much porn, and I look at their kids and it doesn't seem like they have anything to say to their kids. In fact, the prevailing notion of our world today seems to be that fathers shouldn't have things to say. That's the weird, perverted, twisted world that we now live in, is that fathers really shouldn't say something. But God says, no, no, no. Fathers have a role, and that is a role to say something and be a role model for them. David failed to be a role model by having all of these wives and actually having anything to say. And fathers do this all the time. You know, they do not become good husbands. And if they are not good husbands, they are rarely good fathers. I'm not saying it can't be. I'm just saying that it rarely happens. If they're not a good husband, they're not a good father. You want to be a good father? Be a good husband. Yeah, there we go. Well, anyhow, that's how this scene ends, and we'll end on that note of saying, wow, where's this going to go? Does God approve of Solomon?